Okay, now we're to chapter 4M, Adolf Hitler, and I just want to say, just before I start, that yeah, I know there's a lot of information about Hitler on YouTube, just on the internet in general, and you know, some people probably have heard so much about him that they're just tired of it, on one hand. And then there's this meme that's been out there for, you know, I don't know how long, but it's getting more and more, that really Hitler was a good guy, you know, and he was this and he was that, and he's just been tainted by history because, well, he was attacking the real enemy and this and that. And so I know that's out there, but I think that we need to also consider the spiritual side of Hitler, and that's not necessarily a positive thing, positive spirituality. So let's just read here, and of course this is not going to be as none of these chapters are, you know, they're not an in-depth study of these sort of things. There is new information I find as I read through things I hadn't read before or thought about on a few of these things. But so the idea here is, though, is to dig deeper, not just to read this book and take it for all you need to know. That is definitely not what we should do in general. Okay. When I started digging into this New World Order business, I have to admit I was shocked to find out about Hitler's occult background that has been suppressed by the truth-sterile school system and the mainstream media. I was not surprised that Hitler was a participant of the Great Plan, and Hitler actually believed that he was going to be the one to complete it. But I was certainly all the more unnerved as I connected the dots to what his religious beliefs really were and who it was that funded him into power. Keep in mind when reading this section that I am just giving you the gist of the story, as all chapters in this book, and due diligence for further information is up to you, the reader. Hitler's early life certainly gave no indication of his future as the fascist leader of Germany. After failing, for the most part, in high school, he left and began to live as a vagrant on an orphan's pension which came from his father's service as a customs official, among other income. He wanted to become an artist, but simply didn't have the artistic talent needed to get him into any of the better art schools at the time. Born and raised a Catholic, Hitler rejected those traditions in his teens and began to lead a hedonistic lifestyle. This set him down the path towards the awaiting tentacles of the Great Plan. Hitler is painted by the history books as a Christian, when in reality he was anything but. Another carefully planted deception by the Great Plan. He was actually a theosophist and espoused theosophical ideals. Here are just a few of Hitler's thoughts about Christianity, which are the exact same ideals put forth by the founder of Theosophy, Madame Blavatsky, who hated Jews and Christians in particular. Quote, Christianity is a religion that defends the weak and the low, unquote. Quote, it is purely Jewish and Oriental in origin, unquote. Quote, it forces people to bend their backs to the sound of church bells and crawl to the cross of a foreign god, unquote. Quote, it began 2,000 years ago among sick, exhausted, and despairing men who had lost their belief in life, unquote. Quote, the Christian tenets of forgiveness of sin, resurrection, and salvation are plain nonsense, unquote. Quote, the Christian of mercy is a dangerous, un-German idea, unquote. Quote, Christian love is a silly concept because love paralyzes men. Unquote. Quote, the Christian idea of equality protects the racially inferior, the ill, the weak, and the crippled. Unquote. Searching for a purpose in life, he spent a large amount of time in the Hofburg Library in Vienna, delving into books about the history of the occult and Eastern religions. Eastern religions, such as Hinduism in particular, are held in high esteem by the members of the Great Plan for their occult contributions, and are reflected in particular by Madame Blavatsky and Alice Bailey throughout their literary works. Hitler was highly motivated to learn the mysterious powers contained within the occult and had experimented using some Eastern religion meditation techniques. This was far too slow a progress for him, and he wanted to learn as much as quickly as possible about the secrets of the occult. Around the age of 21, a book dealer named Ernst Pretsky allegedly introduced Hitler to a psychedelic drug containing the hallucinogenic mescaline. This produced clairvoyant visions that made Hitler believe he had opened the door to the gaining of supernatural powers he could use for his own nefarious purposes. He allegedly also experimented with other hallucinogenics in his quest for knowledge and power. The upper echelon of the Great Plan has always used mind-altering drugs during black magic ceremonies to open portals in their minds to demons, and Hitler had stumbled upon this. Some years later, Hitler got involved with the Thule Society in Munich, who had the same dedication to gaining occult powers as he did. The Thule Society was an occult group in Germany largely based on the teachings of, drumroll please, Madame Blavatsky. Blavatsky's book, The Secret Doctrine, was allegedly one of Hitler's favorite books, and I don't doubt this because the Theosophy-based occult Thule Society was later transformed by Adolf Hitler into the National Socialist German Workers' Party, Nazi Party. Blavatsky is also where Hitler and the Nazis not only got the idea to use the swastika as their emblem, but also to label the Jews with the hexagram who were destined for the concentration camps. It is my belief that the reasons the Jews were being marked with hexagrams was to verify the intention to use them as human sacrifices to Lucifer and other occult gods, the interdimensionals, who are literally the power behind the occult. Both of these occult symbols are contained within Blavatsky's symbol of Theosophy, as we went over already. One of the founders of both the Thule Society and the Nazi Party was occult master Dietrich Eckart. Eckart was a dedicated Satanist and one of the seven founding members of the Nazi Party. Eckart claimed to be the initiator of Hitler into the secrets of Luciferianism, and is quoted as saying on his deathbed in 1923, quote, "Follow Hitler. He will dance, but it is I who have called the tune. I have initiated him into the secret doctrine, opened his centers in vision, and given him the means to communicate with the powers. Do not mourn for me. I shall have influenced history more than any German." From the beginning of their association, Eckart allegedly believed Hitler was the Antichrist, and Hitler dedicated the second volume of Mein Kampf to Eckart. Eckart was that important of an influence on Hitler. It is through the Luciferian Thule Society that Hitler received his Aryan supremacy and eugenics teachings, which are the exact same ideals taught by Blavatsky. Hitler was literally following the program of the Great Plan as laid out by Madame Blavatsky via her own demonic interactions that were transferred into her books by automatic writing. Hitler jumped on board the Great Plan train when he ventured into the occult. Some people are naturally more receptive to supernatural, occult influence and power than others, and Hitler was gifted in this particular ability. Once on the inside track of the occult through the Thule Society, Hitler was careful to try and cover the tracks of his occult dealings. Hitler made various public statements to try and diffuse the existence of occult influence within the Nazi Party, even disparaging it. Keep in mind that, although the official Nazi policy was to exterminate the Freemasons along with the Jews, this was a front and only applied to those lower-ranking Freemasons who were not the fellow occultists involved with the Great Plan, which is about 99.9% of them. Hitler even became a member of another, even more sinister occult group called the Thule Society. According to the English writer Lord Bulwer-Lytton, who named the society, Vril was the occult power that woke up man's ability to possess superhuman qualities. The Vril Society counted two other important people besides Hitler among their membership, and who later would become infamous Nazis: Hermann Göring and Heinrich Himmler. The most evil of Hitler's entire inner circle was without a doubt Heinrich Himmler. He was the grandmaster of several secret societies, and allegedly had satanic and black magic masses organized in several different old castles around Germany. As head of the dreaded SS, Himmler was chiefly responsible for much of the terror which was created by the Third Reich, including the abominable experiments performed on imprisoned Jews and others by the infamous Dr. Death, Joseph Mengele. I'm going to go over briefly the truth of the matter that the Illuminati did in fact finance Hitler, but I will leave it to you to do your own research into this further. I suggest starting with a book called Wall Street and the Rise of Hitler by Professor Anthony Sutton. This book details that GM, General Electric, ITTC, Ford Motor, Chase Manhattan Bank, Morgan Guaranty Trust, Exxon, and other American companies financed Adolf Hitler and provided him the weapons and supplies to wage World War II. Another smoking gun is the fact that President George W. Bush's grandfather, the late U.S. Senator Prescott Bush, was a director and shareholder of companies that profited from their involvement with the financial backers of the fledgling Nazi Germany. Brown Brothers Harriman, one of many of Prescott's employers, acted as a U.S. base for the German industrialist Fritz Thyssen, who financed Hitler in the 30s before falling out with him at the end of the decade. Bush was also the director of the New York-based Union Banking Corporation, UBC, that represented Thyssen's U.S. interest. Thyssen owned the largest steel and coal company in Germany and grew rich from Hitler's efforts to rearm Germany between the two world wars. You've got to remember that after World War I, Germany was in ruins, both economically and physically. They needed huge money to rebuild and fell right into the hands of the Rothschild money cabal. Prescott Bush's Union Banking Corporation assets were in fact seized in 1942 under the Trading with the Enemy Act. Among other easily verifiable facts showing the Illuminati were backing Hitler was the fact that the Rockefellers were selling oil to Hitler via Spain to fill the gas tanks of Hitler's Luftwaffe Air Force and the Panzer Division of tanks that were rolling all over Europe. As a proponent of the Great Plan, Hitler was indeed the enemy of the Jews. Hitler's Holocaust and massacre of the Jews was a perfect ploy to generate the worldwide sympathy needed to initiate the rebirth of Israel, all per plan. The seed for Israel coming back into existence was in fact planted in 1917 by the Rothschilds. This happened with the creation of the Balfour Declaration. Lionel Walter Rothschild, eldest son of the diabolical controller of the Bank of England, Lord Nathan Rothschild, was a close friend of Zionist Chaim Weizmann. Lionel worked to formulate the draft declaration for a Jewish homeland in Palestine with Weizmann. Weizmann was a Zionist leader, president of the Zionist organization, and the first president of the State of Israel upon reunification. On November 2, 1917, Rothschild received a letter from the British Foreign Secretary, Arthur Balfour, addressed to his London home at 148 Piccadilly. In this letter, the British government declared its support for the establishment in Palestine of a, quote, national home for the Jewish people, unquote. This letter became known as the Balfour Declaration and was ultimately used by the Rothschilds to force Britain and the Allies' hand after World War II into reforming Israel by United Nations mandate, of course. Arthur Balfour was chosen to be part of the Great Plans Roundtable Group in 1891, and with Illuminati financial backing, went on to become Prime Minister of Great Britain in 1902. In a nutshell, Lionel Rothschild, who was tied intimately to the federal government of the United States through their control of the newly found United States Federal Reserve, offered to bring the United States into World War I on the side of the British in exchange for the British supporting the creation of a reunited Israel. They accepted, the U.S. was brought in, and the Allies won World War I. However, due to the inability of the proponents of the Great Plan to establish a legitimate one-world government body that was needed to sanction the recreation of Israel, namely the League of Nations, the recreation of Israel would require one more terrible war. The ritual sacrifice of millions of Torah-abiding Jews by Hitler was orchestrated in order to generate the worldwide sympathy to convince the nations of the world to capitulate to a, quote, Jewish homeland, unquote. With Israel now back on the world stage, it was full steam ahead for the proponents of the Great Plan to finalize the path to fulfillment of the Bible prophecies and the heralding of the New World Order. I have a high degree of respect for Jews and the State of Israel as the homeland of the Bible events, but the resurrection of Israel is factually the number one harbinger of the dawn of the end times. Okay, that's the end of that chapter. And I know there's a lot of diversity of thought here on the rebirth of the nation of Israel and what it really means, and it does give, pause for thought that, a lot of people, or some people have decided that, the Illuminati, or whatever you want to call them, they wrote the Bible and they're now using it as a playbook, on and on, There's just, like I said, I know there's a lot of diversity of thought. This is the book writer's opinion. I tend to, agree with most of what he's saying, and I'll just leave it at that. But yeah, this is just one of those issues that you just got to kind of go with your gut and your heart, and after doing some research, you just have to make up your own mind. So, and the next chapter starts off with Aleister Crowley, and look forward to reading that. So, talk to you then.